Do something. You're Jesus. I know you're Son of God, so do something, please. I mean, how often do we, when we do something, courage, whether we've run out of guidance or whether we've not been able to connect to God or hear His Spirit, how many times we're like, God, please do something right now, fix this. There's this area of my life where I'm having trouble. I'm falling in sin. Just things aren't going good. God, fix this right now. Please do it this second. But, God said, what does your concern have to do with me? My hour has not yet come, meaning that in due time, God will follow through and that God will perform what He needs to do. He will change the water to wine, whatever your water is and whatever the wine needs to be. He will change it in due time, and you don't really need to freak out about it happening in the first place. Another thing that we can take from this is it says, this beginning of signs Jesus did in Cana of Galilee manifested His glory, and His disciples believed in Him. One thing that I kind of like, this miracle, this was, the first sign of God, of Jesus possessing, supernatural powers. And it says His disciples believed in Him. As if, so, maybe they hadn't had full confidence in Him before, or maybe they were sort of doubting what He did. Now, taking that, I want to say we don't need to see God do crazy, amazing things like turning water into wine to believe in Him. I know the disciples were the disciples and they were following and studying directly under Jesus, but as far as this is concerned, I would say don't act as the disciples did, and don't wait till you see the water turn into the wine. Don't wait till after the thing has happened to put your faith in God. Don't have little faith beforehand, because having little faith is going to show God in the first place that you don't trust exactly what He's going to be doing. Now, the disciples weren't the ones in trouble here. They weren't the ones who had run out of wine, or they weren't the ones who needed to be drinking wine or whatever. They didn't need that, but they didn't really believe. It said that they believed in Him now after He had done this miracle. So when you're seeking certain things, as in, whether it be money, no. But whatever you're seeking, whether it be courage or guidance or patience or just being able to be brought through a certain struggle, whatever it is, when you approach God with it, make sure that you're not saying, I need this done right now. I need this done right now because I'm not going to be able to get through this otherwise. Remember, His hour will come. God will do what He needs to when He wills it. And also, don't come having little faith. Don't go into a situation like, okay, this is happening to me. I keep falling in sin, or I keep getting distracted from God, or I can't feel your presence anymore. So because of that, because of the trouble that I'm going through, I'm going to lower the amount of faith that I'm putting in you, but I'll still put it out there that you can fix things if you want. Don't be like the disciples and believe after you see things happen. Have greater faith than they. Have greater faith in God that He will be able to turn your water into the wine that it needs to. So there's a little short thing.
Yeah. So thanks for all the Oh my goodness.
Well, that's good. We're dismissed.
You've got to hear me rant for a long. Wow. All right. That was a pretty good breakdown. I like that. That kind of controversial, isn't it? The first miracle that Jesus ever performs is making the party more interesting. Making the depth of the celebration that much more intense by saying, hey, we got richer wine. Enjoy. Just throw that out there. My wine is Coke. Well, what I meant by that is he said, no. He said, whatever your wine will be, God will turn that water into. Somewhere. Divine. Didn't you know? We went. It's like Ryan said. Anyway. You missed out on the creepy explanation I had of that sign earlier. All right. Well, I'm going to take this to finish up the chapter. We are going through Jesus according to John. Let me ask you a question. Just really fast. If someone were to come to you and say, listen, I've heard about this whole Christianity thing, and I've heard about going to church and all that, but I just have one question for you. Who do you say that Jesus is? And as a part of that, I don't want you to simply just jump into that and think, well, tell them the theological answer. Manifestation of God in the flesh, every bit God and every bit man. And that's important. Those are good things. But how can you describe Jesus to other people? Do you know him like John knew him? Probably not. In the fact that John was able to walk with Jesus. He knew if Jesus snored or not. You know, he knew how Jesus liked his showbread. You know, all that kind of stuff. So John has a different perspective of how Jesus was, because guess what? He was walking with Jesus. But you have the same opportunity to describe Jesus in an intimate way, but from a different perspective. And I think what's missing a lot from the church today is the fact that most people cannot give you an explanation of what Jesus is like. They can give you an explanation of what the church service is like. They can give you an explanation of what the music sounds like, or what kind of activities go on. But really, when you get down to the heart of the matter, they can't tell you what Jesus is like, and that's a concern. The entire New Testament is built upon the testimonies of those who've walked with Jesus. Did you know that? There is not a single individual who wrote a book of the New Testament that did not have some kind of interaction with Jesus, except arguably Luke. And even Luke's account of what Jesus was like came from a biographical... That sounds intense. I'm just proud that I was able to say that. Anyway, a biographical sense. He went to get eyewitness accounts. So he was like... I don't even know, because we don't have TV, so I was trying to think of like a reality TV show that I could compare this to. But I don't have it, so I don't know. It's like a reality TV show, right? All right, you get up and have those like little side notes where the person talks about what happened in the situation that they just filmed that was just kind of boring and awkward. You kind of figured out what was going on. But just to keep the time going, they interview that person and make them embarrassed by saying something stupid, and then you're just like, and then you put it on Facebook. Right, all right. So it's kind of like that. That's how Luke's account went. So every bit of the New Testament is based off of somebody who's telling you what Jesus was like. Paul probably got the coolest experience because he received revelation of Jesus after his ministry supernaturally. All right. So, who do you say Jesus is? Ask yourself the question tonight. Do you really have an answer? Or would you seriously be winging it? Now, I mean, it's gonna be on you whether you can answer that correctly. But how many times do we have opportunities to declare who Jesus is, and we don't because we don't know who he is? It's just a question. So John now is introducing us to Jesus in the real-life person. So 2 weeks ago, we got to look at how John is poetically exposing you to the magnificence of this guy who just so happens to be God. And now he was in the beginning, and now he is come in the flesh, and he will return in the end. And he just goes in this really mystical way that you just kind of want to sit down and just kind of move with it, you know, like... But now all of a sudden he like stops it. He's like, okay, let's jump into reality, what it was like to walk with him. And the first miracle he does is he makes the party more intense. Wow, thank you. But now I want you to see what's happening. So first he throws in the controversial statement of, hey, this is his first miracle. He made the party more intense, but now he's coming to church. I want to talk about the one thing tonight of what it's like when Jesus comes to church. Jesus made a conscious decision to enter into the temple. Now, I was going to do this little exercise with you guys, but I'm going to spare you. What was the exercise? I'm so glad you asked. I was going to sing to you this wonderful psalm, and I was going to have you clap on beat, but since I know that Trevor would probably be the only one, and EJ, our two beat guys right here. They would be able to carry it, and we could follow them. But then you'd have to listen to me sing. It'd be sad and terrible. And I'm not making fun of your clapping ability whatsoever. I'm just not exposing you to anything that would harm your self-esteem. So anyway, all right. So now they've gone and they've partied at Cana. They've had the wine. They've enjoyed. They're just really enjoying life. And now it's time to go to church. It's time to go up to Jerusalem. It's time to celebrate God in the temple. And you're thinking now, hey, I'm hanging out with Jesus. This is going to be pretty intense. Well, before you get to Jerusalem, Jerusalem is set on like this little hill. It's really like a little hill for us because, you know, they call it a mountain. We call it a hill because we have big mountains. They have hills that they call mountains. But anyway, so Jerusalem is sitting on top of this thing. And they have like this stone pathway that goes up to it. So when you enter into the valley in which you're going to look at Jerusalem, it's just like ahead of you and on top. So it's like you're going up to the mountain. And so David wrote this song, and he was like, okay, every time that you enter into Jerusalem, you're going to sing this song. All right, and it's in Psalm 122. I'm not going to sing it. I know. No, Brendan, you won't. The book of Isaiah prophesies what it was like for people who were coming into the temple when they were coming to church. They would. Isaiah says this way, "And many people shall come and say, 'Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem.'" So picture this. They're living life in such a way that they're experiencing at the wedding feast everything that's good for being here on the earth. I mean, really, the wedding ceremony in itself is a celebration of the best parts of life, okay? And so they are experiencing the good lifestyle with Jesus, which is great. But now it's time to go up and experience God's presence. And so as they do that, they prepare themselves. And we need to prepare ourselves when we want to experience God's presence. As they did, they would walk into the valley and they would look at Jerusalem where the temple was seated at the top. And they would walk up and they would sing this song that David wrote for them to sing when they were walking up the steps to Jerusalem. And Psalms 122 says, "I was glad when they said unto me, 'Let us go to the house of the Lord.' Our feet have been standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem, built as a city that is bound firmly together, to which the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, as was decreed for Israel, to give thanks to the name of the Lord. There thrones for judgment were set, the thrones of the house of David. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. May they be secure who love you. Peace within your walls and security within your towers. For my brothers and companions' sake, I will say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your good." Can you imagine what it would be like walking with Jesus into Jerusalem? I don't know if you've ever seen that epic work of wonderness. Totally made that up. I know you can tell. But the Fiddler on the Roof, where like all the Israeli people, and they're dancing, man, they're just like, I don't know. It's like the first sign of stop laughing at me. My DJ did that too. Anyway, all right. So when they were going up, this was a celebration. They would get into this. They would be clapping. They would be dancing. They would be jumping. They'd be doing all kinds of stuff. And I don't know if you know this, but Jesus would probably be following suit with the same thing. They would be rejoicing as they're going into Israel, because something that we don't really grasp is the fact that when they went into Jerusalem, they had an expectation that we haven't been taught. You see, from 4 years old, I'm saying 4 because that's how kind of tall you are at 4. It only knows like 3, but anyway. And from 4 years old, it's like pounded into their head with like rubber mallets and really cool bread. Made a joke there. Didn't even get that. All right. So anyway, it's been pounded into you that Jerusalem will be the kingdom that never goes away. So see, we come from America. We come from, land of the free, home of the brave, and salute and, sing national anthem and play baseball. I mean, that's where we come from. But for them, everything was about Jerusalem. See, the prophets say that in Jerusalem will come the kingdom that shall never end. And so every time that they're going into Jerusalem, they're going in with an expectation that today could be the day. Today could be the day that Messiah comes and sets up this universal, worldwide kingdom, and we're going to be part of it. That's what their expectation was. So they're celebrating, they're dancing. Man, this could be the day. And ironically, they're dancing and singing with Jesus as they're going into the temple, the Messiah that was prophesied, who's going to bring about the kingdom that will dominate the entire world. They didn't know that. So they're celebrating, they're having a good time. Jesus is with them. They're all going to go into the presence of God. This place is wild. I mean, you can just smell the fragrance of God here. People are shouting prayers and praise, and it's almost like you can just feel the depth of God's presence in Jerusalem and in the temple. It's so holy and so powerful with where God is that even the Romans, pagan pigs in their idea, had a reverence for how powerful this place was. When they would enter in, it would be such an aroma of God, and they would be able to look and see all kinds of different symbolism and things that just really got them thinking about God. This was a big deal. This was a life-changing event. And considering that in the world's day, this was the only religion allowed to practice outside of the Roman deities, that tells you something because of the experience that they had there. That's what they were ready to get into. And Jesus is coming to church, and then they get there, and what happens? Now we're ready to look. I said this was going to be a 20-minute sermon. I don't know. We'll find out. Verse 13, the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found those who were selling oxen and sheep and pigeons and money changers sitting there. Making a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen. This was that pinnacle moment where you're bringing Jesus to your church. You're bringing Jesus to the place where you celebrate God. You have him with you. He's singing and dancing and rejoicing with you. He enters in, and as you would take the normality of people cheating others, he gets enraged and furious. The first thing he does, instead of celebrating with everybody and getting on the bandwagon of what's culturally acceptable, he goes and he actually takes 3 pieces and starts binding a whip together. Now, I love to wonder what it was like to be the disciples at this moment, because this was not one of those enraged, like, I'm just going to have a frenzy here. This was calculated. This was seriously well thought out by Jesus. Can you imagine, as you're walking in, you're celebrating, and the cold shudder that goes across Jesus' face as he looks into his Father's house, the place where he's supposed to be experiencing the presence of who he is. People are supposed to be rejoicing, and all he finds are fakers. All he finds are hypocrites and thieves. His face grew cold. Like I said, he was calculated. He went over and he finds 3 pieces, and he just begins to weep them together. Man, because you know John was like the closest to Jesus. He just didn't even care. I just wonder if he was going to look it over. Now, I could just see Peter like coming up to John. John, ask him. What's he doing, John? Looks like a whip. John, ask him. Okay, Peter, I got this. Hey, Jesus. Don't look pretty happy. What are you doing there? Bind us together with love? I mean, what's really going on here? And then, like, Jesus at that point where he's got the whip, like, he goes berserk, and he just starts driving them out. Like, what would you like your testimony at the end of all time to be with your experience of Jesus? There is going to be somebody, when we step into eternity, that their testimony of what Jesus was like, what happened to you, when was the first time you saw him? They're going to be like, he hit me in the face with the whip. What? No, dude, really, like, I was just minding my own business, overselling stuff that shouldn't be being sold in God's house, and he came up and whipped me in the face and said, get out of my house. What would you like for that to be your first confrontation with Jesus? Try and explain that. Never mind. Okay. All right. Why was this such a big deal? I'll tell you. When people went to the temple, they went so that they could get themselves in a position where they could be accepted by God. And that came at a cost for them. Now, understand something here. I'm going to get kind of deep with you guys, and I know you can handle this. They weren't cleaned up by animals dying. They weren't cleaned up, okay? The animals that they were offering so that they could be clean before God was a statement of faith. They're saying, God, I trust that you can make me clean. And this is what you've told me to do so that I will recognize
what you send to make me clean. And so offering the animal is for them the way that they can express that they believe that God will send them a Redeemer. And what was happening, this wasn't exactly cheap. They had to give the best of what they had. They had to spend time in raising the animal that they would bring so that they could be atoned for. And what they would do is they would get to the temple doors, and these hypocritical, foolish people are supposed to be inviting everyone into the household of God are saying, that isn't good enough. You have to buy what we have. And so they had to get rid of this animal that they had raised that would be a representation of what had to die in the place of their sin. And then they would have to go spend a bunch more money that would probably cripple them for the following year so that they could get an acceptable sacrifice. And who's making a ton of money off of this? The people who are making a ton of money off of this are the religious leaders. Jesus is so sick of this tactic he puts together to drive them out in rage for violence. I want to say something. Say it very carefully. We experience the same thing today. Lord over those who are trying to come to faith in Christ by saying, you need to do it. What I mean by that, a lot of people today, they enter into the church, need to hear the message of the gospel. Do you know what the message of the gospel is? It's very, very simple. Jesus is King, and he has paid the price so that he will give you a resurrection. Now, in that resurrection, you have to deal with him, whether you rejected him all your life or whether you received him as king. If you've received him as king, you're his child. But if you've rejected him by choosing your own way, you're his enemy. That's the message that we preach. Jesus is the king, and you have a resurrection. But instead, what we offer is what we come into, and we want to hear what Christianity is about. We say, this is what Christianity is. Live a good life. Be a good person. Be nicer. Buy our t-shirt. Join our small group. Enjoy our activities. Never once. And there's nothing wrong with these things in themselves. But whenever we try and take people coming so that they might hear the message and don't give them the message at all, but tax them so that they can do something culturally accepted, we're doing the exact same thing as what these guys were doing, and Jesus gets furious. He will whip you in the face. He will get you out. He will drive you out, because what you have done is you have taken his house and you've turned it into your own moralistic system to extort people to follow you and not him. Now this happens. And when Jesus came to church and saw this happen, he changed. I want you to jump down to verse 18. Because here is the response of those who are put in charge and are using their authority to mess people up. Do you know what they have the gall to say? They come in and they look at Jesus, and I can imagine it's one of those, who do you think you are, you Galilean kid? We've got robes, dude. We can read. We don't smell like fish. Because our hands are clean. What sign do you do to prove that you have the right to drive us out? You see, no point at all do they get concerned over the fact that they're cheating people that God have brought to his house to experience him. They just say, how is it that you think you're so cool to do this? Jesus says, I'll show you a sign. This is going to be your sign. Destroy this temple, I will rebuild it again in 3 days. Now, for us, we would be like, oh, you, sir, understand. It's resurrection, he died in 3 days, but how does that reflect to the temple? But for the Jewish people, this made a lot of sense. because there was a prophet that they would read from all the time that had this experience. In fact, many of you might know this, because how many know about Jonah, the big whale? There is no big whale to fish. Come on! Matthew 12:40 says, "For just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a great fish, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth." Their issue was the fact that, why do you think that you can decide what's righteous for people? Why do you think you can decide what God's house should be separated for? How can you prove to us that you are more righteous, more holy, more powerful than we are? What can you do to prove it? And Jesus says, if you kill me, I'll take my life back in 3 days. Now, for us, what that means is, John is exposing you to the fact that Jesus has the power over life and death. Period. Dot. And so the authority that he has to tell you that what is required of you to enter into his house and be one of his children and belong to him is simply believe in your heart and confess with your mouth. The reason that he can back that up is because he holds the power of life and death in his very hand. This is not an issue of making yourself feel more spiritual. This is not an issue of trying to make yourself feel those little tinglies down your back. What God says, the right that I have to declare to you that you can be my child is this: I have the power of life and death. And anybody that would try and get in your face and tell you that what's more important is that you live a lifestyle is sitting in the same position that the Pharisees were. Why is it that you think you're better? Now, let me explain that, because you could take what I just said and you could run off in left field and be like, well, Pastor Brad just gave me a license to live whatever way I want. The reason that I can make that statement is because God makes a promise to those who really do believe in their heart and really do confess with their mouths. And that promise is that he will fill them with his Spirit. And that means that they will have power to live a new life, the life of Christ. There will be a new heart, a new mindset, a new set of characteristics that will be placed in you because you made the decision to believe. The issue here that was going on when Jesus came to church is people were extorting others with what they brought, saying that that's not enough, you've got to do it our way. And they were binding them. Jesus wants one thing from you when you come to him, and this is very hard and difficult, and it should be left alone in that. Jesus wants from you to say, I am done doing it my way. I am done trying to fulfill what you fulfilled in myself. I am submitting to the fact that you are the only one. You are the only one who can be righteous. There is a death that has to take place for you to come to Jesus, and that is, I am done trying to do this on my own. I am done trying to figure this out my own way. I am done trying to seem righteous, look righteous. Jesus, you are the only one righteous. Do what you will with me. That's hard enough, and that's what Jesus wants. If you want a relationship with him, it comes at the cost of abandoning all that you think is worthwhile so that you can give all that you have left to die. And they were saying, no, before you do that, you got to clean yourself up. You got to look this way. Jesus gets furious. So, Jesus comes to church today, is he in these same emotions? Does he have to bind the cord because we are unwilling to declare Jesus? I hope it can never be said of this church that we are not proclaiming what God requires. And that is a repentant heart and a belief in him. That's what he's looking for. And that's what John is drawing our attention to. There's one last thing that we're going to look at. Verse 22 says that the disciples finally figured out what he was saying after the fact. It says, when therefore he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this. So they remembered after he raised from the dead that the sign that he told them he would perform in order to have the right to do what he did in the temple, they remembered that he in fact fulfilled that. He did put himself in the position of king because he earned the right, humanistically speaking, to be king over all things. Do you know that you were purchased, whether you like it or not, into a kingdom? I think that's one of those things that's like really rough on me when I'm going through the New Testament, because we sometimes try and make it as if it's our choice to come into the kingdom of God. We try and make it as if, listen, you don't want to go to hell, you want to enter into the kingdom, so won't you make the right decision to choose Jesus? And what Jesus is saying through the New Testament is, you didn't have a choice. I became your king. I paid the price, whether you like it or not. Now you've got to deal with that issue. And that's how I think we should really start coming at the gospel with people who don't know it. Look, it's not an issue for you to accept the fact that Jesus has paid for you. He's paid for you. You've got to come to the place where you come to terms with that payment before you have to face Jesus giving a teaching about what it would be like. He said, listen, when you're going to court, settle on your way there, lest you get to the judge. Everything that's said about you comes to pass, and you get thrown into prison. Make amends before you get there. And that's where we are in the position today. Jesus has paid the price for you, even if you hate him. So let's deal with the hate part and actually receive it so that we can be called his child and receive all the benefits of it. I think Jesus is more angry when he's poured out everything for you. He's handed it to you. You don't really have a choice, and then you take it and throw it away. That's what I think Jesus gets angry about. Now we have to come to a realization that our stuff isn't enough and that we need to embrace what he's given us, like it or not. That's the gospel. Now, as this is happening, everybody's in uproar, right? What would it be like if Jesus came here and he was just through with everything that happened here? What if Jesus came in here and got frustrated with what I was speaking, picks up like one of the chords and like drives me out? All of a sudden you'd be like, what's going on? That'd be kind of edgy, wouldn't it? And he starts holding services, next door in the JCPenney parking lot. I don't know. That's kind of what it'd be like in this instance. Jesus is so fed up and sickened by what has happened that he does this. And now people are drawing to him. Fascinating. Everybody wants to jump on board with this because, man, he just stood against all the tradition of the day. And we finish with this in chapter 2. If you jump down to verse 23 and 24, it says, now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many believed in his name when he saw the signs that he was doing. But Jesus, on his part, did not entrust himself to them because he knew all people. Let that last part just totally burn in your mind. This is one of those verses that kind of chills me a little bit when I read it, because you get to see a picture of the real Jesus and how he was with people. Look at this. No, it's not a... Look at your Bibles. But Jesus, on his part, did not entrust himself to them because he knew all people. This is what I'm going to send you out with this week. Are you ready? Jesus is not your tool for other people. He's your king. What that means is that he calls the shots. What that means is that you don't get to use Jesus for whatever personal brigade you're after. And we all have different agendas, don't we? I mean, come on. You guys are finally in that position where you can have an opinion that is actually somewhat sane. Like, seriously, 6 years old, my daughter has the opinion that dinner should be made up of cookies. That is not a sane concept whatsoever. Dennis Bills proved that. Just saying, all right? Let alone like the pinging off the wall of, insanity. It's just, that's not a sane concept, all right? But now you're at the point where you've got a brain. I started laughing at that because I realized how many ways that could come back on me. All right, now, you guys have been able to step into a reasoning position to understand the difference between what you can stand for and what you can't. And you can look at what you do stand for and say, okay, that's a legitimate cause. Right? You're at that point where you can make that decision. But now what happens is sometimes we get on board with our position, we get on board with our perspective, we get on board with the things that frustrate us, and we try and weave in justification by saying Jesus is on my side. Jesus did this after he takes out what we would call the modern establishment, cleans house. Everybody's on his side because a lot of people had bones to pick with what was going on in our day, in that day, with the leaders. But Jesus does not entrust himself to them. There are a lot of people today who have an agenda against the church. I'm just going to be honest with you. In fact, I see it on Facebook and it really irritates me. I have to actually keep my cool over some of these comments that I hear. Like, oh, the church is just dumb. The church just hurts me. Just, oh. I'm so sick of this. That tests me because I just want to, in the flesh, go off on their face. I mean, really, it's not good. That's not holy. Jesus doesn't entrust himself to me for me to do that. So I don't. But basically, there's a lot of people who have all these frustrations against why the church is stupid, why it's dumb, and they stand on their little soapbox and they say, this is why my way is better because, right? And whatever that looks like, we don't have the right as Christians to be in that position because we've died to that. And Jesus, with all the people who are coming to him, excited over the fact that he turned the establishment on itself, they weren't with him so that they could believe in what he said. They were with him so that they could support their agenda. And what I'm going to send you out with is that there's a lot of agendas that people are standing on, and they're getting their authority to stand on them from Scripture. And Jesus is saying, I am not entrusting myself to them. You don't get to beat people over the head with your Jesus card just because you're a Christian and you think that your concept of what's going on is bad. Is there a lot of bad things going on? You bet. But you're here for one purpose. You're here to tell people the simple message of the gospel. Jesus is the king of your life, like it or not. You're part of his kingdom because he's going to raise you back to life. And when he raises you back to life, he's going to look and see whether you are actually devoted to him through your heart. How is he going to see? Because Jesus said it like this. This is how you know what a person's like, what their fruit looks like. It's a fancy way of saying, do you want to know what a person's like? Look at what they do. Look at what they produce. Look at what they make with their opportunity and with their time. And you'll find what they believed in. The only requirement for you to be in Christ is to believe in him. But that belief will have a byproduct. James says, what good is your faith if it doesn't do anything? Your faith's dead. In other words, if you say you believe something and then do nothing about it, you probably don't believe it. Right? We have a special term for that. We call them liars and hypocrites. Jesus brings you back to life. It says that the book of life is open, which is all those who've been written in it who belong to him. The way that we get written in there is we make a simple confession. We say, Jesus, I'm not king. You are. That's what I have to send you out with. Jesus does not entrust himself to us for our agenda. He says, follow me. Say what I tell you to say. That comes at a cost for you and me. That means that we can't be on our soapbox, but that we need to actually read who he is. That means that we can't just go around beating people over the head because we don't think they're being good enough. We need to simply pray and ask God to change their lives. All of this comes back to a focal point. Your life has to be run by the King. That's all I got. 20 minutes. It's just never going to happen. Tonight, I just want to hammer into you what John saw that Jesus was everything that he said of himself. He says, I'm the way, truth, life, hope, I'm your adoption, I'm your offering, I'm all of this, and we're going to look at it. But tonight, when we look at that. He says, I'm the person who's going to make life more interesting. I'm going to clean up your place of worship. And I'm not going to allow you to use me for anything other than what I've come to do. So what do you know about Jesus? What have I given over for you to take hold of so that you can say, this is what I learned at church? I'll tell you, Jesus is going to make your life more interesting. He's going to make every bit of living wonderful because he shows you how to enjoy the life that he's given you. But in addition to that, he's very concerned about how you worship. He's very concerned about how you praise him. And so he will clean out anything that would distract you from him, even with a whip if necessary. He does not want you thinking that you've got this all together if you are not focused on him. And finally, he is not entrusting himself so that you can use him for your agenda, but rather that you can be about his business, to declare him for what he says he's going to do, and that's what he's done in your life. That's the gospel. Let's pray tonight. Father, in Jesus' name, as we come to you, we are desperate.